There are growing questions facing the Trump administration for its explanation behind an operation that killed a top Iranian general. Senior administration officials are trying to explain how to characterize intelligence reports that led to Qasem Soleimani's death. This comes after Defense Secretary Mark Esper contradicted the president yesterday, saying he did not see evidence that indicated Iran was planning to attack 4 U.S. embassies. Meanwhile, Iran is seeing a third day of anti-government protests. People have been demonstrating after Iran admitted to accidentally downing a Ukrainian passenger jet, killing all 176 people on board. For more, let's bring in Ben Tracy, Julia Manchester, and Charles Marino. Ben is a CBS News White House correspondent. Julia is a reporter for The Hill. And Charles is a former Department of Homeland Security advisor. Welcome to all of you. So the president is facing fallout over his explanation for the killing of General Soleimani. Ben, Defense Secretary Esper undermined the president. How are senior administration officials grappling with this issue?
Well, largely by pretending that the president and the Secretary of State are saying the same thing. The president himself tweeted out this morning saying, "My team was in agreement that there was an imminent threat from Qasem Soleimani." But remember what we're talking about here. The president on Friday night on Fox News said that he could reveal that Soleimani was targeting 4 U.S. embassies. And when asked directly about that on Face the Nation yesterday by Margaret Brennan, Secretary Esper said he never saw that particular piece of intelligence. Clearly, he was not trying to get in the crosshairs of the president, and he said that the president was basing his assessment not on intelligence, but about what he thought could happen. Those are very, very different things. So you see the White House kind of trying to have this both ways, saying the team was in agreement, but also saying very different things publicly.
And so, Julia, how are lawmakers responding to this? What sort of reaction are you seeing from them?
Right. So this really comes at a time when the Trump administration in particular is under quite a bit of pressure from some of their what have been conservative allies in the Senate, namely Senator Mike Lee from Utah, someone who has been very staunchly supportive of the Trump administration. But I think there is concern on Capitol Hill from Democrats openly and maybe some Republicans behind closed doors that the Trump administration doesn't really have a straight message on this, and that this entire operation wasn't organized in the way that it should be and has resulted in quite a bit of turmoil over in Iran. However, I would argue that with the downing of the Ukrainian jet and the subsequent protests against the regime in Iran, that maybe has taken some of the pressure off of the Trump administration to address this head on for the time being. We saw President Trump saying in a tweet today that he was supportive of the protests happening, clearly trying to jab the Iranian regime and the Ayatollah and the leadership there. However, we know that this pressure will continue to plague them still, and that, in terms of messaging, they probably need to be on the same page at some point.
Right. And to your point about lawmakers' response, of course, Democrats are not going to let this go easily. Over the weekend, House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff voiced his concerns about how the president and his cabinet are characterizing the intelligence behind the Soleimani operation. And here is what he told Margaret Brennan yesterday on Face the Nation. Let's listen.
They are overstating and exaggerating what the intelligence shows. And when you're talking about justifying acts that might bring us into warfare with Iran, that's a dangerous thing to do.
So, Charles, given all that we now know about the TikTok that led up to this strike, do we believe the threat was legitimate, or was it more about a potential array of targets that were presented to the president and he just said, let me choose that one?
I think the threat was legitimate, whether it was imminent or not. That's up for discussion. It seems like we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here with respect to intelligence. Again, intelligence is a very tricky area. It's got to be fact-based. It cannot be overstated, misstated, and we can't get it wrong. We've learned this lesson in Iraq. And what happens when you get it wrong is it causes the suspicion and doubt that's occurring right now. We now find ourselves in the same situation as Iran when they first denied that they shot down the Ukrainian airliner. So at some point in time, we need to limit the scope and how much we're talking about intelligence. We need to get on the same sheet of music. I find it very hard to believe that as intimately as involved as the defense secretary was with the planning, that he wasn't aware of the intelligence that the president of the United States is portraying regarding the 4 embassies being targeted for attack.
So then, are you seeing here an administration that is just on different pages, or what are you seeing when it comes to what the public might portray as a little bit of dysfunction in messaging.
That way. I think what's going on the part of the president is he's trying to oversell something that doesn't need to be oversold. If there was intelligence that Zardari was behind the attack of the embassy, then he should stick with that, and that should be the talking point. But to try and oversell it and make it something that it wasn't initially,
right.
I think the American people are going to become very frustrated about that.
Very good point, Charles. All right, so this all comes amid violent protests in Iran following a deadly attack on a commercial airliner. So, Ben, how is the White House responding to this? Initially, it was cautious about a response after the Iranians claimed responsibility, correct?
Yes, and now the White House is basically encouraging these protests. You saw the president over the weekend and still today encouraging these protests in Iran, also tweeting in Farsi over the weekend and basically warning the Iranians not to do any harm to these protesters, and also tweaking the Iranians further, saying, turn back on your internet, let reporters roam free. These are not things that we see President Trump talk about very often. Keep in mind, he's been very quiet about the protests that have gone on in Hong Kong for months now, but he is actively inserting himself into this situation in Iran, going as far over the weekend to say, I don't care if the Iranians never come back to the negotiating table, just don't kill your protesters. So clearly he's trying to draw some sort of line here in terms of the behavior he does not want to see from the Iranian government.
So, Charles, can you put these protests into perspective for us? We know that some of them were going on even before the Soleimani strike and the airliner, the Ukrainian airliner that was down. Tell us why people are upset now and how it's complicated by the already tense relations with the U.S.
Well, I think if we look at this historically, there's been many times where the Iranian people have tried to kind of rise up, if you will, and protest the policies of the Iranian government. The tricky situation here is that these protests can turn on a dime in terms of where they're drawing their attention to, and they could very quickly switch back to the government of the United States. I think right now it's very hard for the Iranian government to get in a very good place with their people since they lied about shooting down a civilian airliner, which is a tragedy of enormous consequences here. It impacted, as we know, many governments, the government of Canada, the Canadian people the most, and really they're behind the eight ball here with their people. And I think their people are quite tired of the Iranian government not being straight with them in terms of what happened. So, you know, we're discussing the intelligence that the United States doesn't seem to be on the same page with each other about. And I think that's unfortunate, because right now, in terms of if we weren't doing that, the United States would have a power of strength, if you would, to try and make this right and get the Iranians back to the table. They're really the ones that are not holding the upper hand in this situation currently.
So what are the next steps here? What would you advise? I mean, this is clearly a very delicate situation. You've got protests, domestic protests in Iran. You've got this increased tension between Iran and the U.S. How should the U.S. proceed to, you know, both create more stability in the region and to further its interests in terms of perhaps helping the Iranian people establish a more democratic system?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to initially go right into looking like we're interested in regime change, although I'm sure that would be an ideal situation for the United States in some way, shape, or form. But, you know, based on the actions of Iran over the past several months, you know, you look at the downing of the drone, you look at the bombing of the Saudi oil fields, you look at the, you know, the embassy, the situation that took place there, and then you end it with the downing of the civilian airliner. I think we need to take advantage of the fact that even Iran's own allies in Russia and China are really going to be standing off here a little bit. Nobody wants to be attached to a country that committed the acts that Iran just did with the Ukrainian airline. So I think no matter how we go about it, whether it's a third party like the Swiss or the United Nations, I think now is a good opportunity for us to kind of get back in touch with Iran. Let's see how much they want to become part of the mainstream international community, and let's get them back to the table and again restate what our expectations are for how we think they should behave as a country in good standing.
Right. All right. And Julia, are these tensions with Iran now impacting the president's reelection strategy?
Absolutely. I would say that, it's impacted the 2020 election as a whole. It's put foreign policy very much in the front seat of this campaign. And that's something that normally doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, it doesn't it doesn't tend to be a long-term impact during the campaign. Campaigns tend to be much more focused on domestic issues. However, it'll be interesting because we'll see potentially the Sanders campaign, which has gained quite a bit of traction over the past couple of months, attack President Trump, a president who said that he didn't want foreign intervention in the first place when he was campaigning in 2016. President Trump also campaigned against those so-called endless wars that Bernie Sanders talks about so much. However, it appears now that he's gotten the United States, or appears to have had the United States more embroiled within the Middle East. So that's something I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats hit him on. However, I could see this playing potentially in Trump's favor. During times of crises, and the American people tend to rally around the president. So depending on how this develops, I think that it could potentially help him. However, it'll be interesting to see how foreign policy really plays for the Democratic field, as well as President Trump as a whole, and how long it stays really at the forefront of the headlines.
Right. And one way that some people say it's helping him is that it is sort of changing those headlines, at least temporarily, from impeachment to foreign policy and Iran. But of course, impeachment is looming. Ben, House Speaker Pelosi could transmit the articles to the Senate this week after a nearly month-long delay. How is the House preparing?
Well, the White House impeachment team, which is mainly the White House counsel's office, says it is ready. They say they've been ready for a while now during this delay in sending these impeachment articles over. This weekend, the president was of a couple minds in terms of what he wants from this trial. On the one hand, he was tweeting saying he wants witnesses like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff to have to testify. But then he would tweet out a couple of hours later, the Republicans should just vote to quickly dismiss this and let's get on with it. Let's not give any credence to the Democrats' hoax. I did talk to some folks here at the White House this morning, and sources here are saying that they don't expect any sort of quick dismissal of the impeachment articles in the Senate. They say that the optics of that just don't work for the Republicans, and that if a vote like that is taken, there will be many Republicans that vote against it because they feel like they have to at least listen to the arguments from both sides, have time to ask questions, and then they could take a vote as to whether or not they dismiss the articles or whether or not they call witnesses. I'm also told by sources here at the White House that the White House is preparing for the fact that there may be more than 4 Republicans, that's the number you need to call witnesses if all the Democrats agree, that there may be more than 4 Republicans that will go along with that because they feel like they will want to hear more testimony from some of the people involved. I'm also told the White House will likely claim executive privilege to try to block John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor, from testifying in that trial.
Who has said that he is willing to testify if subpoenaed. All right, so the drama continues. Julia, once House Speaker Pelosi transmits the articles, what are the specific next steps? And do we have any idea on who will be called on to serve as impeachment managers? This is potentially, these are star-making turns, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We don't have a clear idea as to who those managers will be yet, but there's quite a bit of speculation that Adam Schiff, the House Intelligence Chairman, could be called. We saw also that Nancy Pelosi, after the House voted on impeachment last month, she floated the idea of Justin Amash, the Republican turned independent who voted in favor of impeachment. But yes, you'll basically see these articles transmitted to the Hill, and we could see a trial start as close as Wednesday. But it's interesting, this falls really ahead of the Iowa caucuses and really amid the, we have the Democratic debate tomorrow night on Tuesday. So it's kind of clear that Nancy Pelosi was cognizant of this in terms of how this could impact the campaign. But I think this will be a question in the long term is that how long this will last. Will this be quick or will this bleed on forever? And I think that's where it impacts 2020 and Democrats, especially those Democrats, Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren, who are running for president, but they'll be stuck in the Senate chamber during the trial, something they're going to have to calculate.
Absolutely. All right, Julia Manchester, Ben Tracy, and Charles Marino, thanks to all of you. We really appreciate it.